to follow all of this, so Rabbi Yosef Karo decided that he needed to make a shortened form of Shulchan Aruch, and he took his parish on the Balaturim, including the Rambam, and he made a summary of Shulchan Aruch, and that became known as the Mechaber of the Shulchan Aruch. At the very same time that Rabbi Yosef Karo was summarizing all the Piskei Halacha that he had from the Rambam, Moshe Isserles, the Ramah in Krakow, realized that that he did need to do the same thing, and he wrote what was known as Sefer Darkei Moshe. And Ramah, Moshe Isserles, was about to publish a summary of his Darkei Moshe, his Piskei Halacha, based on the Rosh and the Balaturim, and he was shown in a dream that he should not publish because Rabbi Yosef Karo had already published in Eretz Yisrael. So he waited till Rabbi Yosef Karo wrote his Shulchan Aruch, and the Ramah, Moshe Isserles, went and wrote footnotes to the Shulchan Aruch wherever he felt that the Rosh disagreed with the Rambam Psak, because Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Mechaber, the Shulchan Aruch, followed the Rambam, what we call the Sephardi Psak. And that became the body of the Shulchan Aruch, the Beis Yosef's commentary or summary, and the Ramah's footnotes became the first what we would call contemporary Shulchan Aruch. However, again, the same problem took place. That in every summary, how did they get to that summary? Maybe somebody would learn the halacha, learn the Gemaras, and learn the Rambam, and the Yosef would come up with a different conclusion. So they realized that that the fact that we had now these 4 Shulchan Aruchs written by Rabbi Yosef Karo and the Moshe Isserles' footnotes was hard to track the halacha. So then started what we call the Noise Kelim, the various different commentaries around the Shulchan Aruch, primarily the Shach and the Taz on the Torah Zav and Sifsei Kohen on Yeridea, and Ibn Ezra, and then Beis Shmuel on Ibn Ezra, and the Magen Avraham on Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim, etc., in order so that we should be able to again trace back Rabbi Yosef Karo Ramah's summary of Shulchan Aruch and trace it back, including where they disagreed. And that became the Shulchan Aruch that we have. The big Shulchan Aruch is at the center of the Shulchan Aruch is the summary of the Rabbi Yosef Karo, known as we call him the Mechaber of the Shulchan Aruch, and the Haggah, which the footnotes, which were written by Rav Moshe Isserles, and now the Noise Kelim, all of the various different explanations on the Shulchan Aruch. However, the main way that people connected with all of this discussion halacha was really included in what was called the Shalos and Shuvas. People would ask the Shalos of their Rabbanim, and the Rabbanim would go look at the halachas and give various different situations which were not found in Shulchan Aruch, but based on Shulchan Aruch, and they would decide how the halacha would apply in their times. And that became the body from the time of the Shulchan Aruch was written. The majority, going all the way back to Rashi, etc., was the Shalos and Shuvas, questions and answers. People would write to them with Shalos, with questions, and they would write back a Shuv, because that was the way that they were able to respond. And they summarized, they would publish, mostly towards the end of their lives, all the Shalos and Shuvas, the questions and answers that were based upon Shulchan Aruch, but how to apply it in different situations in different communities. And there would be discussions going back and forth between all the Gedolei Yisrael. And right behind me over here is a whole section of what my father's and then whatever I've added contemporarily of the Shalos and Shuvas, including Rav Moshe Feinstein, Zeichat Tzaddik L'Bracha, the Stipler, and the Chazon Ish. These were Shalos and Shuvas, discussions on the halachas based upon the discussions of how to apply halacha in their generation. Finally, after we're talking about the coming to around World War I, too much information, too many Shalos and Shuvas, too much for people to be able to know how to paskin the halacha for today. So several other very famous authors were written. One is the Shari Tshuva, Pischei Tshuva, which summarized all these discussions of the Sharos and Tshuvas of those 300 years, and how they applied on the page of the Shulchan Aruch. And then we got to the place where the Chafetz Chaim realized that we need a way to paskin halachas, day-to-day halachas, and he wrote the Mishnah Berurah on Orach Chaim, on the law halachas of daily living. And therefore we have the Mishnah Berurah, which gives us the way to trace back halacha, back to the Shilos and Chuvas, all the discussions of the last 300 years, back to Rabbi Yosef Karo, who was approximately, and the Ramah, which is approximately 400 years ago, back to the Rambam, back to the Balaturim, back to the Rosh, all the way back to the Gemara. So if you can imagine, you stack up all of this. You take the Gemara, you take the commentary of the Rosh, the Rambam, Shulchan Aruch, all the way come to the Mishnah Berurah, you have a whole stack of Svarim, and on top of it, we have the Mishnah Berurah that tells us how to paskin the halacha for us, as close we get. And of course, there's things that are happening today which weren't even around when the Chafetz Chaim was doing the Mishnah Berurah. So it still gives us ways in which we have to learn how to deal with halacha. So therefore, I just want to give this background, because if you know the trail how to find the back, the way to really learn halacha this way, a Pesach in halacha, Paskin's halacha, he has to track it all the way. He has to know the Gemaras, he has to know the Rambam, he has to know the Shulchan Aruch, he has to know the Beis Yosef and the Bach, and the Bach was the Ashkenazi commentary on Shulchan Aruch, and has to know all that in order to be able to, even when we take a Mishnah Berurah, how to apply it to today's world. So when we learn Shulchan Aruch, we learn Mishnah Berurah, we're look on the very top of a very deep, very steep mountain of body of halacha, and we're lying upon very strong foundations. And therefore, when we learn Shulchan Aruch, someone say, well, how do you know? Maybe I don't agree with it. The only way you cannot agree with it is if you know the background. If you find that it doesn't apply quite to the situation, you can't simply change it because maybe he didn't understand it. You have to understand where they got it from. So I just wanted to give that little historical introduction before we get into Hilchos Pesach. So if you open up the Mishnah Berurah has Hilchos Pesach is the fifth chelik of Mishnah Berurah. What I want to do is quickly, we're going to learn the Beis Yosef and the Ramah. We're not going to learn the Mishnah Berurah yet. I'm going to learn first the several simonim that get us into Hilchos Pesach, just using that summary that Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Mechaber, and the Ramah did, so that you can follow at least to understand the halacha and its different sections. So we look at Hilchos Pesach. The first section is called Taf Chav Tes, 429. That we don't say Tachanun throughout the month of Nisan. There's two paragraphs. The way Rabbi Yosef Karo summarized the halacha. There's goes back to the Gemara will tell us it went back to Moshe Rabbeinu that you start asking halachas of Pesach before Pesach 30 days, and the Gemara tells us that we learn it from that Moshe Rabbeinu started telling the halachas of Pesach Sheni right before Pesach, the first Pesach, the first Pesach in the Midbar. So 30 days before Pesach starts the learning and discussing of the halachas of Pesach. That's the Beis Yosef. Hago. The Ramah, a footnote to this. And the minig is liknois chitim. Liknois chitim l'chalkan la'anim l'tzarech Pesach. The minig is that starting from 30 days before, the minig is to already buy the wheat in order for it to be able to have it, so that you have a Pesach. It's a fund that every person who lives in a city for 12 months is mechuyev to give money for, as we call it, moras chitin, to be able to buy grain so that people will have in order to be able to have matzahs on Pesach. So that was more Schitin, the Ramah adds to not only do we have to learn the halachas of Pesach, we have to start preparing and provide so that everybody will have matzahs for Pesach. Siv Beis, we don't say Tachnun all of the month of Nisan. And when on Shabbos Mincha we don't say Tzid Koscha because that depends on being saying Tachanun. And we don't say Eidim and you don't have any fast during the month of Nisan. Except for Tainus B'charim on Erev Pesach. That's the only one fast that's allowed. That's the Beis Yosef. Haggah, the Ramah adds a footnote. When it comes to Levaya, there's a special tefillah that's said to accept Hashem's judgment, that to be dying baruch dynamis. We don't say Tzaddik Hadin. Throughout the whole month of Nisan. V'noagu she'en times 12. And therefore, we don't have. Otherwise, we have no fast at all during the month of Nisan. Even though there is a minig that on the person's yortzeit for a parent, for a mother or father, there's a minig to fast, but not if it happens during Nisan. But if a person has a bad dream and therefore accepts upon himself a tainus to okay. But you do fast for Tanis Chaloim. Ve'ein Omer Mizmor L'Soida ve'el Kel Erech HaPayim. And we don't say Mizmor L'Soida on Pesach. On Erev Pesach, we'll talk about that later. And not El Kel Erech HaPayim right before to take out the Sefer Torah. V'lam Natseach Be'erev Pesach. We don't say Lam Natseach. All these on Erev Pesach. V'loi b'Yontiv and not on Yontiv. So we don't do Mizmor L'Soida, and the reason for that is because Mizmor L'Soida is for the carbon Toida, which was the only carbon which a person brought chametz as part of a carbon. So since you can't bring carbon Toida because you can't bring chametz, so therefore we don't say Mizmor L'Soida. And the two other parts which are connected to Tachanun was Kel Erech HaPayim right before taking out the Sefer Torah, and Lam Natseach Yadcha Hashem B'Yom Tzara. During the Chodesh Nisan, we relied that Hashem is going to give us chesed, and we don't say it. And this he brings down minhagim. This is the other minhagim. There's no other source for that for the halacha. And there's also another minig, which is the day after Yontif to have a suda, to eat more food and drink, and it's called V'hu Isru Chag, and that's called Isru Chag, and it's based upon the way that they had the karbonis, that they could be mamal, they could finish whatever karbonis that was not eaten during Yontiv, which we could be eaten after Yontiv, and therefore we have Isru Chag B'Reisim and Karnas HaMizbeach. They would be fattened the Mizbeach with all the karbonis that had not been consumed during Yontiv. That is Sim Tov Chal Tes. That's the Beis Yosef and the Ramah on how to approach the month of Nisan. Sim and Tov Lamed. We're going to do several tzifim, just Beis Yosef and Ramah. And then Bezim will have a chance. We'll go back and we will go back to learn the Mishnah Berurah itself to get how it applies and the exceptions today. Later, I just want everybody to get used to knowing what the Shulchan Aruch itself is, what the base of the Shulchan Aruch is. Tov Lamed, the Beis Yosef is one paragraph. Shabbos of Inyanei Pesach Kohen Oisei Shabbos HaGodol. The Shabbos right before Pesach is called Shabbos HaGodol. Why was it called Shabbos HaGodol? Because the miracles that happened on that Shabbos, that year, Pesach, the first day of Pesach came out on Wednesday. Shabbos before was the day that Moshe Rabbeinu told Bnei Yisrael to go take the lamb for the Korban Pesach, and that's when all the miracles took place. That the Mitzvah didn't stop them, and also there was supposed to be a whole war that took place between the B'charim, because they heard that there was going to be Makas B'charim, but we'll get into that. But Haggah, here's the Ramah's footnote. V'aminig loymar b'mincha haggadah b'tchilas havadim on Shabbos Haggadah. The minig is to say the Haggadah b'tchilas havadim ayinu ad l'chaper al kol seinu. The minig is to say part of the Haggadah on that Shabbos Haggadah. And that's and throughout the winter there was a minig in which people said Baruch Nafshi at Mincha on Shabbos, but starting from Shabbos Haggadah they stopped saying Baruch Nafshi. Okay. These are again the preparations for Pesach, Shabbos Haggadah. 7 Taf Lamed Aleph. Zman B'dikas HaChametz. When is the time for B'dikas HaChametz? By Beisifim, there's 2 paragraphs. B'tchir Aleph. B'tchir Esleil L'Yud Aleph B'Nisan B'Dikas HaChametz. On the night of the 14th of Nisan, we check for Chametz. La'or Haner, using a candle, and a candle only. We don't use a torch. Now so we see you can use a flashlight because it works better. They can't use any bigger light because it casts shadows, or a bigger flame would cause fires. You have to check all the corners and cracks in the house. You have to check any place that you might normally use chametz throughout the year. Base. Person has to be careful on Erev Pesach not to start doing any work. On the night of B'dikas Chametz. The chiyuv of B'dikas Chametz takes precedence over everything else, work, and as we're going to see, and you should not have sit down to eat until you did B'dikas Chametz. Even if a person has a regular shir to learn every night, you shouldn't go to a regular shir until he did B'dikas Chametz. But let's say he started learning still before when it was still daylight. He doesn't have to stop. And here's the Ramah adds a footnote. This is the Ramah's paragraph in parentheses. And some say that even if you started a shir before during the day, you're obligated to stop. B'dikas Chametz take precedence to learning Torah and all other obligations. And therefore, there are people that wait till right Tzeitzei Kechavim when it's dark enough to first start checking with Ken, and don't do anything until they do B'dikas Chametz. As we will learn later, that if there's a lot of chametz still in the house, so you have to wait until all the chametz is gathered to one place. You know wherever the chametz is before you can do the b'dika. So therefore, if there were those, there's minhagim would wait until the household is ready for b'dikas chametz, and obviously they have to wait to make sure that the b'dikas chametz should be appropriate, because if there's chametz laying around the house, then b'dikas chametz is a bracha l'batol. You have to know where the chametz is. It has to be separated off. All the chametz that would be for the next day. Taf Lamed Beis. Then b'dikas chametz, the brachas that have been made on b'dikas chametz. Beis Sifim has 2 paragraphs. We start off with the Beis Yosef, Aleph, the Mechaber. Kadim shi'ascha livdoi yivarech Hashem kiddush shalom mitzvahs v'tzivanu al bir chametz. The bracha that we make, and this whole the pages of Gemara on this bracha, but we end up including that to make the bracha al bir chametz, on the removing of chametz, not b'dikas chametz, al bir chametz. Okay, that is the Beis Yosef, the Ramah's footnote. V'im hischal livdoi b'loi bracha. Let's say you started checking and you realize you hadn't made the bracha. Yivarech. You can still make a bracha. Calls man shaloi yisayim b'dikosei. You can make a bracha throughout until you actually finished the b'dika, which is the definition of that. Even though you've already started the b'dika, but as long as there's more to do to check, you can still make a bracha. Via Zohar, shlo yidaber ben a bracha latchilas b'dika. So the Beis Yosef says, but from the moment that you make the bracha and you start the b'dika, so that this is the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to do the b'dika. You make the bracha, you have to start the checking. And therefore, talking in between, at least the starting of the checking, would be a hefsek between the bracha and the action of the b'dika. But the best thing is not to be distracted by talking about anything until they're done with the b'dika. So that you should not forget to place on your heart, you should be aware that keep on thinking about all the places that we used chametz for a whole year. So the mitzvah b'dikas chametz, and this is the way this is all based on the Gemaras that are behind this, is considered to be by Chachamim a priority that takes priority to almost everything else, and therefore even till you finish the b'dika, you really shouldn't talk about anything else. In order for another bracha l'batala, you have to first make the bracha and then start the b'dika. But even till you're done with it, it is best not to talk, so that you shouldn't lose sight of and forget what you have to do still to finish the b'dika. Okay. Now, so the question is, the obligation of this bracha, is that dependent upon the person's house? You have the next halacha. The Mechaber says, Sif Beis, b'bracha achas yochel livdei kama batim. With one bracha, you can use that to check a number of different houses, because the chiyuv is on the person, not on the house. And if a person wants to do it, then he has a number of different places to check. So he takes his family around him, and they should all hear the bracha when he starts. And send each one to a different place to check his designated place to check. And all relying on the bracha of the Baal Bayis, and that halacha applies as well today. It takes one bracha and you can check, or have people who heard the bracha check many places for you. Haggadah, the Ramah adds a footnote. The minig is to put out pieces of bread so that the person who's checking will have what to find. Because otherwise he'll make a bracha and he doesn't find any chametz. The wife did a really good job, cleaned up all the chametz, and he makes a bracha, even though the mitzvah would be to be baidik, even so, but it's better that he actually find some chametz. Umihu, however, the Ramah adds, im loy nosan, if they didn't put out the pieces of chametz, lo ikiv, it doesn't stop it. The das called Adam in bracha levar im nimsu, because the bracha, as I said, al bir chametz, to get rid of chametz, doesn't mean to be baidik chametz. It means to get rid of chametz. So if you've gotten rid of chametz, the bracha is that if you find chametz, then you will get rid of it, and therefore even if a person didn't put out pieces of bread or chametz, you still make the same bracha and check anyway. And the 10 pieces of bread, which we know about, the put out 10 pieces of bread, are so that you should know how many pieces are, because the halacha is, as we're going to get into later, that if a person is missing one of those pieces, maybe a child or a mouse took away the piece of bread, you would have to check the house all over again. So you have to know exactly how many pieces of bread were put out, so that not only is there not be a bracha levatala, but that you know that you didn't lose, that you didn't overlook something. And that's from the Kolboy. As you see in the Ramah brings his sources of Piskei Halacha for wherever he adds to what the Beis Yosef said. So let's continue on with the halachas of b'dikas chametz. I want to make sure we have the whole thing all together, at least the essence of the halacha, and then we'll be able to go back and learn the Mishnah Berurah to help us understand these halachas a little bit better. Tov Lamed Gimel. Simon Tov Lamed Gimel, section 433. Dinei b'dikas chametz, the halachas of how to check for chametz. So boy, Yud Aleph Sifin is here for this already. There are 11 paragraphs. They're called Seifim. Aleph. When you check, you have to use a candle. You cannot rely upon the light of the moon. And if a person wasn't able to check the night of the 14th, night before Pesach, when you check, you should not use the sun to check. You have to still use a candle, because the sunlight leaves a lot of shadows and corners will not be illuminated by the sun. Sadra, but a porch where it has a lot of sunlight, there, because the sunlight gets to all areas, so therefore you can rely upon sunlight. Well, it didn't connect the same thing would happen if there's a skylight. skylight in the middle of the room, which allow a lot of sunlight during the day, you'd be allowed to, but the Eved rely upon the light of the sun because it spreads the light evenly, and therefore doesn't cast.
In today's day and age, could we use a flashlight?
Of course, a lot of people say it's even better. Okay, Siv base, Simon base. Ein boitkin, Siv cotton base. Ein boitkin l'or havuka. You cannot use a torch. You can't use an Abdullah candle. El oraner, you have to use a single wick candle. V'loy b'ner shel chelev, and you cannot use what was called a tallow candle made out of animal fat. V'loy shel shuman, or one that's made out of what chelev is treifah fat and shuman is kosher fat. V'loy shel shemen, and you cannot use an oil lamp. Ella b'ner shel shava, you have to use what the shava was beeswax. You have to use it. We use paraffin. We can use paraffin, but the only alternative to these all those years was beeswax, because bees were always around throughout our history. That's the Mechaber Haggah. The Ramah adds a note to it. For Yechidi, and that means it's a single wick. But if it's two candles together, afilu kluim, if they're braided together, that's a halacha like a torch. So you can't use an Abdullah candle. It has to be only a single wick, because you cannot be afraid to go and look into the corners. And if you have something that's very strong flame, we're afraid you won't be able to go, you won't look well into the corners because you're afraid you're going to start a fire. And the Ramah again brings the footnote of where he got it from, the Maril B'Shem Aguda. In the shul, we actually have the Piskia Hamaril, which Ezra Fried bought for the shul, and it's there if you wanted to see the source. Siv Gimel, Boydek, you have to check all the places that maybe you had used to find chametz during the year. Therefore, therefore, all the rooms of a house and the attic, which is the second story, which was commonly used, therefore you have to check all of them. Because people might have left the table with a piece of bread in his hand and went to get something and left it there. But wine cellars, which you don't use, don't get wine from during the meal. Same thing with granaries, where there's a lot of grain, which is not something that you would go to in the middle of a meal to get produce from. You don't have to do bedika because it's not some place where you would go in the middle of a meal. Let's just see what lose track of time. We'll learn for another few minutes. I want to get through this sif because then we have covered bedikas chametz. Dalet, sif dalet. Chori abayis v'zizan aboltim yaksolim. They would have holes in the walls where they would store stuff. They didn't have always cabinets like we have. V'zizan aboltim yaksolim, or there were shelves that would stick out from the walls. She'enu g'vayim harbor, they're not really too tall. V'loy nemuchim harbor, not really low. So you can believe those shelves or those crevices. That's a famous name for them. Waistcots, I think they're called. You have to be avoided because people use them throughout the year. But if they're really the shelves that are really high, that if a person normally can't reach them, or if they're really low, they're within 3 handbreadths, approximately 9 to 12 inches of the floor. You don't have to be avoided because that stuff gets cleaned away easily by itself. Hey, this is an interesting halacha which can be relevant even today. Hey, Gag haYetzia v'hamigdal, the top, this is called the ceiling, but the top of a cabinet or a closet, shigagei mishupoim, where the tops of these cabinets were slanted. So because they were slanted, you really couldn't put anything there. And so those you don't have to check. Even though they are in the house. However, that means that china cabinets, etc., which are flat, unless they're really too tall, you really have to get up there and check them. If they're beyond a person's arm reach, then you don't have to check them because you would never put anything there during the year. Vav, Refa Shel Bakar, a stall where the animals were kept, the barn. Ain't tzarich b'dika, but you don't need to be b'dik there. Because if there's chametz there, you know the animals are going to eat it. Same thing for a chicken coop. Ain't tzarich b'dika, you don't have to do b'dika. Because if you left any chametz there, the roosters, the chickens will eat it. Same thing, the middle of a courtyard. You don't have to check there. Because the birds, the ravens and other birds will eat up any crumbs that you had left out in the middle of a courtyard. That's where you don't know if there was chametz there. But if you know for sure that you put out chametz there, you like to feed the birds, or you had a chicken coop where you were feeding them, and you know for sure there was chametz there, then you have to check. Hago, here the Rama adds a footnote. Avo, the common Sim Hey Mavor, but later on in Sim Taf Mem Hey, 7 more that we're at 433, that's in 445. The Motilasher chametz b'makom sha'if mitzuyim sham. Let's say you have chametz left in the house, you're allowed to throw out the chametz on the night before Pesach, the day before Pesach, for the birds to eat there. And you don't have to check, don't have to get rid of it. Because we know that even if it was vada chametz until the middle of the day when it's usher, the birds are going to come and eat it. So even if you put out chametz the day before Pesach, you can rely that the birds are going to eat it. And in our neighborhood, the squirrels will get it. Zion. If there's a space between two Jews' homes, each one has to check as far as each one could reach, because they would use the space in between sometimes for food storage. But anything beyond your reach, all you have to do is bittul, which means to give up any ownership on it. That's part of the bittul chametz that we say. Vidaya, and that's enough. But if you're sharing a space in between houses, between a Jew and a non-Jew, you don't have to check that at all, even if you know that you used it. Why? Because a guy is going to see a Jew running around checking in between his house with a candle. He's going to think that the Jew is using some sort of sorcery. And he's going to accuse the Jew of doing something harmful, and he'll cause harm to Bnei Yisrael. And therefore, in the areas where Goyim are using, we don't check, because we don't need to create sakona. Ches, a wall with which they use these holes, I can't think of the word, pigeonholes, which people used to keep the houses. They didn't have furniture, so they had spaces in the walls which they used instead of shelves. V'nofel, but the wall fell down. V'nasa gal, and now instead of the wall, you have a pile of stones. Even if it's not more than 3 tvachim tall, which is still something that a dog could get in there and eat. You don't have to open up the stone, pull away the stones, because there are scorpions, there's animals, there are insects that are dangerous. Because you find this, what do we call them, spiders, and that can cause a lot of damage. Because we're worried that since there are insects that can cause can cause damage to a person by being there. As long as they're doing the mitzvah of b'dikas chametz, we know we're not worried about it because the mitzvah will protect him. But maybe when he's done, he's going to say, "Oh, I think I had some things there, like some needles in the wall that they made there, and I'm going to go looking for it." The other day, sakana, because they come to a danger because the mitzvah won't protect him then. That's if you stam where you don't know for sure if there was chametz. I'll be do sheish tachta chametz. But if you know under that pile of stones there for sure was chametz, if it's not bigger, taller than 3 to 9 inches, 9 to 12 inches off the ground, so you have to take a shovel and a pickaxe and clear away the stones in a way that they don't cause yourself to be in a place of danger. But let's say there's a big pile. This wall was a big wall. It was heavy bricks, and it's more than 3 tvachim tall. Believe it or not, all you have to do is bittul, because midaraisa, the Torah by a person has to be hefker. If a person says I don't own it anymore, that's all the Torah asks. That should not be ours. It should not belong to us. Test. Martiv shemisanim by shur shel chaviyos. A martiv is a overhang. It's side the houses where they had eaves that hang over, and they could store things underneath the eaves, the sides of the house. They would put barrels of produce under them, and they would stay outside because it was cool. Then it would fill up the entire storage area with these barrels. And there's several layers of barrels on them. Adakar, they pile them up all the way until the ceiling. You don't have to check there. You have to check the top level. One level below that. So you have to check really what he's saying. You have to check the front of this storage area. You don't have to check the whole depth of the storage area. Just the top level. The top level that's right by the ceiling. And the area which is right in front of the door, right in front of you, that you still have to check. So if a person has renting a storage space, you have to check the storage space, even though you put stuff there, but you don't have to go all the way into the depth of it. You have to check the front place where you might have gone to with food in it as well. Sif Yud, shuls, midrashos, you have to check them. And that's going to be interesting how we get there in isolation. Because children will bring chametz into the shuls, as we're well aware of. Yud Aleph, the last sift, and then we're almost done with the halachas of the basic halachas of b'dikas chametz.
It's interesting that they blame the children, and that's on the Bate Midrashis. I guess they didn't have Kiddush in shul in those days.
Well, they figured that they probably before Yontif, they probably didn't have Kiddush, but still the kids hide stuff. Every year, we have had the swarm shelves cleaned out. Every year we find chametz. I know we're going to do this year. We have to convince the goyim to come and clean out the swarm. I guess if you pay them enough, they'll do it. Listen, but if a person cleaned out his rooms the day before Pesach, 13th day of Nisan, and he was very careful to check for chametz and to get rid of any chametz. He was very careful not to let anybody into there to bring any chametz in there. You still got to do b'dikas chametz on the night of the 14th because it might have happened, and if you don't demand it, then things can happen. Haggadah the Ramah adds a footnote to this. And you should clean out your rooms before b'dikas chametz. And pockets or the sleeves of garments, of clothing, the palm chametz, sometimes you stick a piece of chametz into the pockets. You have to be baidik. Not only do you have to enjoy the room, but you have to check your clothing where you might have left chametz in it. Mario, this comes from the parish of Mario and Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah brings that footnote. Okay, this is the beginning, and Be'ez Hashem, I would like to try and set this up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We will have this. We will learn both the halachas and Mishnah Berurah. But I wanted to show first, demonstrate the core, the center core of Shulchan Aruch, and then we'll be able to understand how the Mishnah Berurah adds, bringing in the back sources which were abbreviated over the generations in order to get to Shulchan Aruch and give us the sources, because over the years many different things happened that were slightly different than they were at the times of the Shulchan Aruch. And if they were different than at the times of the Shulchan Aruch, then we have to have Allah, how do we apply it? And that's where the Mishnah Berurah and the Pesach Shuvin, as well as the Berehativ, come in to help us understand how to use halacha and make it relevant to us in our day.
Have we given any thought? I'm sure we have. I mean, how we're going to do b'dikas chametz this year? I mean, not b'dikas. Mechiras chametz.
I have. First of all, we can do it even by texting. All you have to do is some form that is an official designation of authority of
Kenyan.
Of a person's authority of ownership. So any agency, as we would call in American law, that you can instruct somebody to do something for you is good enough for b'dikas chametz. So we can either do it by texting, email, or telephone call. We'll do the mechiras chametz, and then I rely upon we'll find a guy who will show up in order to make some money in order to be able to buy the chametz. But the mechiras chametz this year will be done by
maybe a Google sheet that people could fill out.
Okay, I don't know how to set that up. If you want to set up a Google sheet, we could do it.
Not sure how to do it. I mean, maybe we can come up with a standardized form that people can go and fill out. And I'll reach out to Moshe Silber. He seems to be the most.
Listen, we can set up an email and people can email the form.
Right.
It's not the form that's important. It is the giving over the authority to act on your behalf to transact, sell the chametz for you. And that
so if they have a form and people sign it, scan it, and send it back, that would.
Yeah, we could do it that way. I would say we have, but any one of those forms, any way of those forms, we set up a single format for it, is good.
All right.
And we will have overcome that challenge as well. We'll have to see how we can plan how to do it. We could email out the form and people can fill it out and email it back. It's definitely one of the problems. I've got the form ready to go. So scanning it, sending it out is not a big problem.
Right.
All right, so we have covered the basic halachas of b'dikas chametz, and Be'ez Hashem, tomorrow we'll go through some of the Mishnah Berurah on it, and then go on to, I'd like to, each section of the halachas should be one whole thought rather than chopping it up into little pieces. And the best way to do that is Mechaber and Ramah, and then we go back to the Mishnah Berurah. If we could, we would start off with the Tur Shulchan Aruch and walk all the way through. And if everybody has a chance, we can, once Chavrusa in Tur and Shulchan Aruch, I'd be glad to do that. That's the way that halacha is really learned. So anybody who has some time that would like to have halacha in Tur and Shulchan Aruch would be.
Amen.
Yeah, we got the time. We're not going any place. Okay, better set it up.
Rabbi, can I also make a suggestion? We had ongoing, the Chidus minyan the last few days, so maybe Rabbi can be machaz to ask to encourage people to join, because it's today was a little schwach, but if we do, I know it's not the same as davening with minyan, but if we all do it as a tzibur together, it's something I would assume.
Zman tzibur is important. So
Yes,
Tomorrow morning, 8:30. What time is going down Mincha today? When is Shkia today? Who's got the Shkia in front of them? Let me see. Get the Shkia. Here we go. Shkia today is 7:10, 7 o'clock tonight. Bez Hashem, we'll try and daven Mincha together.
Okay. 7 o'clock. Hello?
Is there matzah baking?
What's that?
Is there going to be any matzah baking this year?
Virtuals.
Only the Rebbe Shalom knows that. We're ready. We have the flour, we have the water, we have the tent. We're ready to go. So it's up to the Rebbe Shalom to give us permission to bake matzahs. All sorts of scenarios play around in my mind, but right now it's too dangerous to think about how we're going to do it. But Bez Hashem, I hope that Hashem will get rid of this Magaifa and we'll be able to bake matzahs.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
Have a good day, Rebbe.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Let's see, how do we leave?